So, welcome everyone to the 2012 Transforming Assessment webinar series. We're very pleased tonight, well tonight as in Australia, in the morning in other parts of the world, to have Dick Bacon from the Department of Physics at the University of Surrey as our guest presenter. And for those of you who have been to our previous webinars, you'll know that this series is all about assessment, in particular online assessment. And what we've tried to do here is have a very wide range of topics. So that's why we've got guest speakers from all over the world in our series to give different perspectives on the use of assessment in the online environment. Dick is well known for his association with the work on SToMP. And for those of you who don't know what SToMP is, it's software teaching of modular physics. It was quite a well-known project in the UK, funded by the UK government, and it has been used by quite a number of people around the world. And Dick will no doubt be talking about that, as we've got Matthew's just put up the reference there, or the URL to that. So one of the other things you'll notice is that's a hypertext link. So you can actually click on that link on your own computer and it will open up your own browser and you'll be able to see that as well. So I'm going to hand over to Dick now. So thank you, Dick, for giving your time this morning, and hand over so you can talk about transforming assessment with adaptive questions.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you, people, for coming to listen, and thank you for being asked to take part in this series. The actual SToMP materials were developed in about 1992 to 95, and they've now been withdrawn because we can't keep them up to date with modern operating systems reliably. And so now SToMP is just about this assessment system. Okay. So what I'd like to cover in this series of slides, I want to put the thing into context. I want to mention a bit about effective feedback, then about what I mean by adaptive questions, because there's a wide range apparently of the way that one considers adaptive questions. A little bit about question design and about how to design help for students, and then some results of work I've been doing and some student opinions on that. Okay, so the context of the stuff I want to talk about is some electronics tests for the first year students. There are 27 questions. They've been set to the students using electronic formats since about 95, always in a SToMP assessment system. And as technology has developed, we've moved assessment systems within SToMP. And this latest system that I'm using the adaptive questions with is called SToMP II, and it's QTI version 2.1 compliant. And we're talking here about 15 of those 27 questions that we modified to make them adaptive. Now, it's partly about feedback and how to make feedback effective. And I'm sure that some of you are familiar with this paper from Gibson-Simpson. Actually, there are several papers from Gibson-Simpson on this subject about how to make feedback effective. And it varies. Some of them are 11 conditions, some of them are fewer, and some of them a few more. But of course, some of the conditions for effective feedback are outside the control of the academic staff. They're to do with the institutional policies. And I've picked out 4 here that I was particularly trying to address in the use of these adaptive questions. So to be effective, feedback must be targeted. Now, the way I'm doing this is to use MAL rules. If you haven't come across MAL rules before, then they're mainly for numeric questions, but not necessarily. And it's the MAL rule is the wrong application of a principle, or the application of the wrong principle to answering the question. And as far as electronic questions are concerned, the idea of the MAL rule is that you can build that incorrect solution into your electronic testing system so that when the student chooses that answer, particularly with numeric questions, you can be reasonably certain that that's why they got to that answer, rather than just randomly selecting the number. Secondly, the feedback must be relevant to the student's understanding or misunderstanding. Now, this is in red use history because I haven't done that. But the only way I can see that you can make the feedback relevant would be to have a variety of feedbacks that addressed different features of the student's understanding. I haven't gone down that route. Then it must be attended to. Now, in the general sort of feedback that is given for work handed on paper, many institutions have a 2-week turnaround time. And that won't usually lead to the student applying the information, or attending to the information given in the feedback. They might read it, but they'll have forgotten what the original question was by that time, and they'll have forgotten how they answered it. And so one of the advantages of the electronic system is that you can give the feedback immediately when they're still thinking about the question. And another aspect of that, of course, is that you want them to have thought about the question carefully, which means you want them to have actually worked out an answer and preferably committed to it, actually entered it into the system and said, this is my answer, by pressing the submit button. And then finally, of the 4 I picked out, the feedback must be applied. And again, on paper, it very rarely is. But in electronic systems, by offering another try at the question, still with marks, although the marks have been reduced in this case, it's a strong incentive for the student to have another try at the question. And that seems to be quite effective. Okay, now this can all be achieved within one QTI 2.1 adaptive question. By this time, you should be asking yourselves, what's he on about on QTI? So, just briefly, QTI stands for Question Test Interoperability. It's a specification that's been developed by an organization called IMS Global in the States. It's a not-for-profit organization, and it's for moving electronic questions between different testing systems. The first version, 1.2, which finally reached 1.2.1, was published back in 2003, and it was very widely implemented. Things like Blackboard and WebCT and question mark perception, Granada, and quite a lot of others implemented exporting questions in this specification. It's an XML specification, and importing from it. They didn't keep very closely to it. You couldn't write something in question mark perception and then export it to WebCT. It just would not work. Unfortunately, because they didn't keep close enough to the specification. But there are, at one time, I think I demonstrated moving questions between about 5 or 6 different systems. But one of the interesting developments was that a number of people, myself included, recognized that the QTI was actually rather a nice way of actually writing the question itself in the QTI XML. And we wrote assessment systems that are actually based on the QTI. Version 2 was published in 2005. Unfortunately, the detail is completely different. There are translators around to go from version 1 to version 2, which is convenient, but there's no structured way of getting back from version 2 to version 1. And there aren't many commercial assessment systems that use version 2. Moodle exports in a sort of version 2, but there are some mistakes in it unless someone's corrected it since the last time I looked at it. Now, in version 2, there are some very nice developments. The support for numerical questions is good. It's built in that you can test for accuracy and precision of numeric answers. And one of the other nice things you can do in both QTI 1 and QTI 2 is have a variety of different conditions you can test for, each with their own feedback. If you're familiar with things like the normal assessment systems you find in WebCT and so on, there's only one bit of feedback you can give for right and one you can give for wrong, and some questions you can only give one bit of feedback anyway. And version 2 supports adaptive questions, which is good news. Now, adaptive questions allow dialogue. When you press the submit button, You can change the question text in front of the student's eyes. You can change the interaction. You can become a multiple choice question from a numeric. You can change the feedback, and you can offer further tries. There's actually no limit to the complexity. And whilst that sounds as if it's a positive thing, in fact it can be a bit of a nuisance, because the questions can become so complex, they get very difficult to edit. And if one person is using one way of doing it and another person is using another way, it's very difficult to understand that other person's question when you look at it in the raw XML. And also getting an editor that will deal with adaptive questions with this unlimited complexity can be very awkward. So one of the things I've been trying to do is to develop sort of templates for adaptive questions that you can do most of what you might want within a template, within limited complexity. So, designing a question. Here you see a conventional numeric question, or at least what I consider to be conventional. Here I've set a variable called mark, which is, I just started off as 10, which is 4 marks. And then you show the question, and then is the question right? If it is, then you would also check for whether it is exactly right, approximate, or with the wrong precision. And you would adjust the mark accordingly. I tend to take off 2 marks if it's only approximately correct, 2 marks if it's wrong precision, and 3 marks if it's both. And then set score equal to mark, and then drop out the end. And if the question is wrong, then you show a final wrong feedback and set score to 0. When you have the possibility of adaptive questions, you can do something like this. You can say, is the mark still greater than 3? This is just a way of stopping going on forever, of limiting the question. Then you can say, is it equal to one of the Mal rules? Is the student's answer equal to one of the Mal rules? Remember, this is a numeric question. If it is, then you show the feedback that addresses that particular Mal rule mistake. You reduce the mark by something. I think I reduce it by 3, having set it to 10 in the first place, and go back and show the question again. If it isn't, then you show a generalized feedback. I tend to start with something like, I can't quite see where you've gone wrong, but what you should be doing is something like this. Reduce the mark the same amount, because it isn't the student's fault that they've got a Mal rule or not a Mal rule, because they might have been applying a Mal rule that you just haven't recognized yet. And then go back and show the question again. And so this would allow 3 goes at the question before you drop out the bottom on the final Mal rule being wrong. And what I'm trying to reduce, of course, is the number of students who go through just getting wrong and getting the wrong feedback, because just getting a feedback message saying what you should have done is this is not terribly helpful to students who just got it wrong. It seems to me much better to try to get it than to get it right, even though they only get a smallish mark for it. Now, if you've got a question that asks more than one number to be entered, then you just combine this for multiple numerics. But I've got a scheme for blanking a box that you have answered correctly, or students answer correctly, so they don't have to keep on typing that in. I'll show you that in a while. Now, some students, when they start a question, just have no idea how to proceed. And therefore, I wanted to give help. So I just want to read what people have written there. Yeah, okay. I wanted to provide help for the student who didn't know how to start. I didn't want to mix it up with this Mal rule type feedback. And I wanted to give the student some control over the amount of detail that was to be given. I didn't want to give them more help than they needed. I know how infuriating it is to be told how to do something when you know that, but you just can't remember the principle to get going. So I organized the question like this. This is a screenshot of one of the questions coming up. That red text is the correct answer that is only seen in tutor view. We discriminate in this assessment system. We discriminate between when the tutor's looking at it and when the student's looking at it, so clearly that doesn't crop up when the student's looking at it. Now, this question actually requires the same number in both those boxes. So that's the correct answer. A equals B equals that. And then my little private scheme is that I put alternative, the Mal rule answers, in braces there. And so each of those answers is based on an incorrect application of the principle of this question, or on an incorrect principle. And they each have feedback that is unique to those misapplications. I find it very difficult to dream up the Mauer rules. Some of them are obvious, but some of them aren't. And of course, when I get the students' responses, and I have a big table of what the students typed, you might think it's very easy to pick up Mauer rules, but of course all the questions are randomized. The numbers are randomized, and therefore it isn't easy to pick up common answers between the students. You can't just scale them because they're not linear necessarily. So I'll come back to that later probably. So we have this option down here, show me the help options for the problem. If the student presses that, they, get this box coming up, or rather it changes in front of them. It takes away that part and puts up a 4-part multiple choice saying, do you want the problem, the method described? Do you want to show actually how to go through it? Or would you like it split into smaller parts? And you can see that the marks that are taken off are different in each case. Now, the splitting it into smaller parts, of course, is a very significant modification to the program, but it's to the question. But it's something that can be done in this adaptive question. Yeah, I agree. It does sound a little like gaming, but how else are you going to do it? I don't want to give too much feedback, as I said, and describing the principles by which the question has been, it can be answered, I think is worth fewer marks being lost. And so it seemed a sensible way to do it, but if anyone can come up with a good, oh, I see, okay, right, it wasn't a criticism, fine. Whoops, I'm sorry, I keep clicking at the window. So this discusses the principle involved. The 4 marks describes in more detail the actual process. Obviously, it doesn't put numbers in. We never tell the student the actual answer. We only tell them how to do it. And the splitting the problem into parts, we break the problem down, getting the student to solve the components until it's obtained. Now, there's a problem with implementing that. We have a question here that the student doesn't know how to answer. And if he gets it wrong, we're giving them feedback and other tries. But each individual little question we're asking here, we don't want to go down that route because the complexity of the question, to my mind, would be way, way over the top. And so the scheme I have for the intermediate little questions is, for the nth part of this broken down problem, I show the question. Is it right? If yes, all's well. If it isn't right, then if it's the first time, I explain in simpler terms, and I'll usually give a numeric expression for the answer. I mean, these questions are pretty simple anyway, when you've broken them down, and so giving them a numeric expression should get them in the right direction. And if they still get it wrong, then I usually say something like, you need to go and see your tutor, or you need to discuss this with a colleague, with a friend, who can help you. And then I get on to the next part. Right. I've tried to make some multiple choices adaptive on this same scheme. It isn't very straightforward. If you have a 5-option MCQ, in 3 tries, there's a 0.7 probability of getting it right without knowing anything about the subject. And that's far, far too high. Of course, it's not quite as simple as that because you've reduced the marks, but it's still not really the way to go about things, I believe. I have done one MCQ in this test set that I think has 8 or 9. I think I'll show you that later, options, and that brings the probability down to less than a half. But the other option is to put a don't know option, which you force to be last. I usually randomize the order of the options, and in QTI you can force a particular choice to be in a particular position, so I tend to put don't know as last. The only disadvantage of that, of course, is that the student hasn't then committed to an answer, and so there's a good chance that they haven't thought deeply about the problem itself. The feedback can be made different each time. and you reduce the marks more each time they see the don't know question. I put in 2 questions that use the don't know model. One was a single choice, one was a multiple selection, and they look like this. Oh yes, this is right. This has got the don't know one. And the correct answer is the 10 to the minus 19. If they press the don't know button, then this is the first message that comes up. I must admit I was a bit in the dark when I wrote these hints, in the dark as to quite what it was that the student was having trouble with, and I thought that probably they needed to recognize that they were talking about the same thing, but they needed to be able to convert it from one energy form to another. And if they needed, don't know the second time, if they needed further help, I repeat that and then give them a bit more information about how to do the conversion. And then the third one, which I'm not going to show you, comes in from a completely different angle, so that if that second hint didn't help, then the third might. '59 got that question, those 2 questions right first time. The multiple selection question, 7 got part right, 2 got part wrong. 2 got them completely wrong, and then 2 went for don't know and then got it wrong. So I can't really draw any conclusions from that. You have the problem that if a student selects don't know or selects help, then that student's already weaker in the first place. And therefore the fact that you might not be able to help them might be the fault of the feedback, or it might just be that that student's not going to get it right under any circumstances. Then there was 1 randomized single choice from 6 choices, and that offered multiple tries. 31 got it right, 5 got it right second try, 2 right third try, 3 wrong third try. Again, I don't really think I can draw many conclusions from that. Now, this is a fairly typical numeric question. Find an expression for the voltage gain as a function of frequency. Find an expression for the phase difference between V out and V in. And then we've got part A and B, C, D. A and C are at 4 kilohertz. B and D are at 40 kilohertz. And A and B are voltage gain, and C and D are phase difference. Now, there's no box here. It would be nice to incorporate student evaluation of the confidence of their answer. Yeah, yes, I have. I've been in talks with people who've been talking about this business of the confidence in the right answer. I confess I don't know how to use the information. I don't know what to do with it, particularly in the context of adaptive questions and trying to get the students to understand. I don't know how I would refine the feedback for a student who was uncertain compared to a student who was certain. Okay, I'll look at that later. Right, this is where the student has already, this is the second try, the student's got it right already, and so that answer is okay, minus 14.9. In fact, you can see it is here, because that's the crib for part C, and the answer was 3 significant figures, so they've got it correct. You see that we've always got this instructional text in blue just to confirm to them what's going to happen. The students, in fact, apparently have quite a threshold for pressing the submit button in a normal question, and it's more difficult, they say, than handing in a bit of work on paper, because it is so final. It's an instant in time at which they're saying, this is my answer, and I realize there's nothing that can be done about it if it's wrong. Okay, so that question, parts A and B, the results look like this. So 32 of them got it right first time. 4 answered with numbers that matched a mal rule. Oh, these are for each part of the question as well, by the way. So this is one number that matched a mal rule, and then the second try they got it right. 4 of them, the answer matched a mal rule, was just plain wrong, and got that generic wrong feedback, and then got it right. 3 of them were wrong twice, right. 11 got it wrong for the whole way through. They're, of course, the students I'm worried about. And the 4 of them got it wrong twice. I don't know what happened there. What can happen is that in a multi-part question, if they only answer one of them and leave the other empty, it's considered as a null answer. And if the student gets it, if they're at the end of the number of times they can get through it, then it doesn't come up as wrong, it just comes up as null. 11 still did not understand the concept. Yeah, that's right. 11 didn't understand the concept, and I would hope that I can then go back and start looking for more mal rules that might match one of their answers, that might give them the tip as to how to get it right. Or, I don't know, it might be that those 11 will never ever get that question right. One can only go so far. And we don't want to give away the answer. We've got to get them to have to understand the concept to get it right. Okay, so 2 of them got a mal rule, and then, I can't remember what I meant by that. Mal 1, mal 2, I see. They got mal 1, one of them went on to get mal 1 again. I don't understand why that happens. Another one got a different mal rule, and then wrong, which is a bit of a disappointment. This one went wrong, mal, wrong, and this one was just mal rule and then it cut off. Oh, I'm sure. They didn't understand the original question, and they didn't understand the hints. I don't know what one can do at that point. One can only go so far. Right. Then, if we go back to this question, which had the help as well, then you can see that the answer matrix here, this multiple answers, mal rules, and help. So, 16 got it right, 2 got it mal rule right, 2 got it double mal rule right, 1 got it wrong and then right, 2 wrong, right, and so on. These people ended up wrong. This person got it wrong twice and then asked for that first level of help, and then got it right. This one got it wrong once, got the first level of help, and then got it right. This one went help 1, then to a mal rule, and then wrong, and then right. Presumably they got it right as a total of that lot, or it was just one particular message meant something to them. And then these 2 got them wrong, even having seen help 2. And help 2 doesn't actually seem to be terribly constructive here. Or perhaps it's the type of student who selects help 2 that's never going to get it right. Help 3, where it breaks it down into smaller parts, I'm very relieved to see that it got it right, because it seems to me difficult to see how they can get it wrong, having gone through help 3. You can try all these later, by the way, because these examples are up on the web. I'll show you where. Okay. Oh, yes. This is the issue, that we are trying to get the students to learn in going through this, and I find it very encouraging that some are going through this process of seeing the hints and then working out how to get it right from there, and that's what makes it all worthwhile. Yes, I agree. Yeah, this can be fed back to the academic staff giving the course. Okay, so the questions with mal rule feedback, that's without help, this is just the mal rule feedback. 332 student questions were right, and then of those who would have just scored 0 otherwise, we have 196 ended right and 109 ended wrong. So 24% went from mal to right, 22% went from wrong to right, 10% went wrong, mal rule wrong or wrong, went wrong to right, and then 8% did wrong and mal rule or mal rule wrong and right. And these people got it wrong, either by going through mal rules and wrongs or just going wrong. And these are the ones that I would want to address in continuing to develop these questions. Then with the help as well, we've got 71 right. We had fewer questions with help. They're a bit more complicated to write. 71 right, 57, 79 would have got it wrong. 57 of those ended up right, and 13%, 11% and 13% got it right, having seen the help. So one can conjecture that they might have got it wrong otherwise, if the help wasn't there. No, I haven't done that yet. In fact, I haven't done it. This series of questions was not last year, but the year before. I haven't got this year's questions yet. Now, this is dealing with each pressing of the submit button. And these pairs are on different numbers of students. There's 156 instances of mal rules going to something, 316 of wrong going to something, and 23 of help being requested. Following the help, what happens? So slightly over half of the mal rule hints led to them getting it right next, and slightly under half getting it wrong. Rather beneath half, about 35% of these instances of reading the wrong answer feedback then went to get it right. Rather more got it wrong. And of the help, it's about 50-50, whether they went straight to a right answer or whether they got it wrong. The fact that that's rather less than half is not actually, to my mind, a great big worry. It's rather a more positive thing that that proportion of 316 students actually managed to be shown how to get it right. And so that, to my mind, is a very positive thing. It's difficult to know whether the right thing to do is to change the feedback to improve that proportion, but to give away the answer in that somehow. I wonder the threshold question level. I don't understand that. Sorry. Oh, by the way, this isn't my course. I'm not giving the. I don't give this electronics course. That's done by others. I have used. No, I don't think I ever have used electronic questions of my own courses because they haven't been appropriate for using electronics questions. They've been the sort of courses where questions are largely around long derivations and things. Okay. Matthew, do you want to say anything about that? I don't quite understand it.
Matthew, do you want to take the microphone and perhaps ask a question that way?
Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Faintly.
Okay, I'll try to speak a bit louder. Sometimes my microphone doesn't work. What I'm getting at is the threshold concepts ideas. You know, the idea of a portal or a critical piece of information that the students need in order to be able to get a concept or be able to move on with their knowledge. I think this is a relevant link. I'm going to stick in the chat now. The idea, there's sort of that idea of, you know, a critical piece of information that the students need to get, in this case, get the questions right. So, what I can gather, there's a body of research and practice and things, and has also been applied in, teaching biology and these kinds of things. So there's projects currently on in Australia looking at this idea of threshold concepts. So I was wondering if this might be relevant. but might be more of a comment than a question. That'll be it.
I'm sure it is relevant. I haven't used it. I haven't actually heard of it before. So I'd like to look at that. Thank you for the link there. Okay, so moving on. Student comments on this. They really like the opportunity to have another go at the question if it's unsuccessful at the first attempt. So I don't have to work very hard at persuading the students to try again. They like that. The best features they thought were giving hints if the answer... Oh, sorry. This questionnaire I give them has a numeric scale, but I always put a box by each question for student comments, and those are actually the most interesting things. So these are straight out of a questionnaire that I give to the students. Giving hints, the answer is wrong. They like that. They like the hints. There's another way of putting it. I like this one. The hints, they often nudge my attention to the key fact. So clearly some of them are right for some people, and presumably they are to do with these threshold concepts. This is just a general comment that it was clear enough to see, and they like to be able to see their mark immediately afterwards. More on that in a moment. The worst features, that's clearly my documentation isn't sufficient. It's very difficult to know what to do because all this information is there. It's given them on an introductory page at the beginning, and there's help that they can use within the system. But the information seems to be at the wrong time, but they don't see it, and it passes them. But I don't blame them. I never. I often miss things as well. They would like a marks summary. Now, when they're working their way through the question, the number of available marks is shown at each stage. But in the feedback, I do not give the marks. The reason is that there's good research that shows that if you give the mark to a student, they won't look at the feedback. They just look at the mark. And so I avoid giving marks. But I presume that could be interpreted as a mark summary at the end, and I probably will address that. This bit is about the inability to review closed questions. I'd never even thought of doing that, but I will have a look. I mean, there is a review feature where they can look at the questions after the whole test is closed. Everybody's finished, after the window of a week or so in which they can do these. So whether they mean immediately or not, I don't know. Now, this is an interesting one. Sometimes the hints, when you get it wrong, are totally irrelevant, and I will come back to that. And I like this one. I do like disruptments. We experienced a few crashes and disruptments with the system over the year. Of course, those are outside my control. There are things like the server going down or network problems. Now, with multiple randomized values, the two different malware rules can come up with very similar values. It was a bit of a surprise to me, but it covers such a wide range of values in these things to make sure that the students do get significantly different questions from each other, so that we can encourage them to work together, which I think is a very good thing. And I only check within 5% of the malware rule value to cater for precision and round effects. And I certainly have seen cases where there is more than one malware rule that matches when I started looking into this. And so what I've done is to, instead of stopping after getting a malware rule match, I now go on and check all the malware rules when marking, and I present all the appropriate feedback messages for the malware rules that match. But I haven't had an opportunity to try that yet. To try it with students, I mean. Otherwise, I agree the feedback might be badly written. Clearly in this body of work, the writing of the feedback, and remembering I wrote the assessment system as well, and having to muck around with that, I probably didn't spend quite as much time doing that as I should have done. So I perhaps ought to readdress that. And this also looks very relevant to look back at Matthew's suggestion of the threshold idea. It also might be possible to start a dialogue within the question, because the adaptability supports the idea of a dialogue, but I haven't even had time to think about how to go down that route. So my conclusions are that we do need to develop questions a bit further, looking for more mal rules. That's a very time-intensive study. I found one mal rule because I'd forgotten to randomize one question, and I'm thinking that finding the mal rules might, from each year, require just one question to be unrandomized. It was very easy in that case. Improving some of the mal rule feedback, improving some of the help, making wrong feedback progressive, because at the moment, the wrong feedback in a particular question is static, and each time they see it, it's the same, but one could make it progressive. Do I mean a dialogue between students? No, I meant a dialogue with the system. The help, remember, started with a little dialogue saying, do you want, which level of help do you want? And it might be that one could start a dialogue with the student to try to find out which aspect it was that they needed help with. It might be more appropriate for some questions than others, and then providing more mark information. But I think the really nice bit is that out of 758 student responses, 205 that would otherwise have just got naught and learnt probably nothing from the whole experience, but they were corrected by a combination of targeted and general feedback and online help. Partly that they got a mark, but much more important, that they must have learnt something because they ended up being able to answer the question, whereas when they started, they couldn't answer it. And that is about all I have to say. I do have another completely different style of interactive that I thought, if people agree, I could just try to demonstrate to you on sharing the app. These, I think, Matthew has given some of these already. Certainly he's given the SToMP one. On the SToMP side, it explains about the SToMP materials being withdrawn. In fact, they're still used at Surrey, and I know they're used elsewhere because I've recently been asked for an update. And if anybody's really, really keen, then it might work where you are, although it runs from a database at Surrey. This is a very recent version of that Neil Barr address that I thought I saw go past earlier. This is this QTI, JISC QTI project. JISC is the Joint Information Systems Committee of the Higher Education Funding Councils. The SToMP site includes a suite of demonstration questions, and that is also in this site, but the JISC project site also includes MathAssess, which is a QTI II system. Yeah, that's right. And a JSS, which is a development site for QTI II questions. And if you're interested in just getting questions, and if you are teaching courses, an academic member staff at a university teaching courses, then you are welcome to look at this Physical Sciences Question Bank, which has nearly 2,000 physics and chemistry questions. Most of them are fairly simple multiple choice, but I have put a few adaptive questions in under the QTI banner, or email me if you want to find out those. The reason I say access it from the SToMP site is that the Physical Sciences Centre has now been closed, and this website is just left up for as long as it will go. And if the question bank ever changes its address, it's only the SToMP site that would change. If you look at the SToMP site, you'll find the link to the question bank right down the bottom. Okay, let's have a look and see if I can do this little demonstration. My idea here is that we're looking at the QTI JISC project site, and this is what it looks like. We've got the MathAssess, the JSS, and the SToMP. I'm selfishly going to look at the SToMP site. There's also some editors for QTI and some other documentation. So I'll look at the SToMP site, and we come up with these lists of questions demonstrating different aspects. And the one I'd like to show you is this financial modelling one, which I put up yesterday. And this is something used by our final year students on our Physics with Financial, I think it's called Physics with Finance, that's right. And this is a model, an algorithm, for finding option prices. And you have to do things like creating a price tree. And so here we have a price tree. I don't expect anybody else to know about this, and I wouldn't unless I had done these questions, but fortunately we've got the tutor crib, and so it's easy. It's talking about the stock price is expected to go up by 10% or down by 5% per 3-month period, and so if that goes up by 10%, it goes to 33, and if it goes down by 5%, it goes down to 28.5. And so you can submit that, and then you get those numbers coming up in the picture. This numbers in pictures, by the way, is not a standard QTI2 feature. This is something that SToMP does that I don't know of any other assessment system that does this. I'll follow this one right through. 36.3. If you don't get the precision right, then at this point it doesn't stop. It just says you want to be more careful, mate. I want to just bring that down, submit, and it says it's not maintaining the precision of the calculation, it should have been that. Notice that the option of creating a price tree has now disappeared. And then if I want to calculate the answer, then it says, no, you can't do that yet, don't be silly. You've got to create the price tree, and you've got to, I've done that, but I've got to calculate all the payoffs. So, oh, it's a shame. It should say that you need to calculate the probability. That's bad. Thank you very much, folks, for getting me to do this. I wouldn't have noticed that otherwise. Now, I happen to know that's the right answer. There aren't many to try, and you always go back and try again. So let's go on. Then you see the number of different types of question style that are coming up here. This is 5 over 100 for R, which is the risk-free interest rate, I think. The time period is 3/12 of a year. The down here is 0.95, because it was 5% down, 0.95, and this is the up rate, which is 1.1. That's 1.1 I use. And then they actually have to work out what the probability is. They're expected to know that formula, but if they get it wrong, then I think it tells them how to do it. No, it doesn't tell them how to do it. They're expected to know. But that's, oh, there's some null rules. 7.25, let's put in. It looks as if it's been calculated using that expression. Oh, of course, they had to select the expression earlier. So we'll put it in 0.4172. That has to be the correct precision, or you have to go back and enter it again. And then so on. So they could have done either of those first. It'll cope with that. You can go back, so you can look at previous things you did. You can unwind, you can go back and start again, going the other route first if you want to. You can create the probability first, and so on. And the lecturer in charge of that course asked me to develop this because he wanted the students to get lots of practice doing these. And the students typically do it about 4 or 5 times each, or some of them go up to 4 or 5 times before they take the exam, and that ends up they end up being fairly familiar with how to go through that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dick, thank you very much for that. That was absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure people have got some questions. I noticed that Connie had a question earlier in the text chat. So what I might do, if you just give me a sec, I might just put that back in. So that question has just come up in the chat there. That was actually from Connie earlier, and I wondered, Connie, did you want to either expand on that, or Connie, if you want to, you can take the microphone if you've got a mic there. You just need to press the talk.
Could I just answer Penny's comment about running it back to the start again, that I've only implemented that in the question I demonstrated to you. The numeric questions, I don't support that. I don't think it would be appropriate. So I've only put it into that particular question.
If anyone would like to take the microphone to be able to ask a question, please go ahead and do that. Okay, Connie, it looked like you took the microphone and then it went away again, so I'm not sure whether you're talking or not. If people are having trouble with their mic, they can always just type in the question. One thing that I probably wouldn't mind asking, Dick, if it's okay, is what I was really impressed with the sort of matrix approach you've got in terms of looking at the combinations of the students in terms of who got it right the first time, who got it right with different sorts of help. And I wonder whether that, have you done much analysis of that to actually look at that and then think about the actual question, think about the concept, and then does that actually change the way you go about doing your teaching because of that? Because to me that would actually be a powerful way of being able to analyse one's own teaching, to be able to look at the way in which the students respond when they ask for help, what type of help they ask for, when do they ask for a hint. Has there been that sort of work done around this sort of system?
I'm ashamed to say that I haven't followed that through far enough to get the information back to the people, to the guy giving the course. And I didn't want to say this, but unfortunately, those questions aren't going to be used anymore. Because that particular course has been changed due to the modularization, which I hate, but don't quote me, of the course. The electronics course has been split into two, given by two different lecturers, and those questions aren't going to be used anymore. And it seems to be the story of my life, because the previous course that I did a whole load of adaptive questions for, the assessment part of that was stopped. And so I'm now turning to a first year course on data handling. And I've started trying to look at how to make the questions there adaptive and provide feedback, and provide helpful feedback and multiple tries, I mean. But I will take on board there the idea of trying to get the information back to the lecturers as to what are the common problems and common difficulties that the students are having that might relate back to how the course has been given.
Yeah, to me that would be a powerful method of professional development for someone actually in terms of their own teaching, to be able to analyse that. And also, I know Connie's comment there about the questions are still useful for formative purposes. And because the sorts of concepts that you'd be covering, even though you're saying those questions wouldn't be used anymore in this particular course, I imagine that the basic concepts there would still be useful for formative purposes for students. So I guess one of the issues here is the sort of the amount of effort that we need to put in for these sorts of to generate these sorts of questions, and then what's their lifetime likely to be.
Sorry, Jeff, could you repeat your last sentence?
It was really about the amount of effort that we as teachers sometimes put in to generate these sorts of questions and the feedback, and certainly there's a lot of work being gone into what you were just showing us there. And I suppose one of the things we'll always look at is what's the lifetime of those particular questions, and are they likely to last a couple of years, or will they only last for 1 year? And that's the end of it, and we have to generate them all again next year because things have moved on. So I assume one of the things we need to think about is how much effort do we put into generating particular questions which perhaps may have a limited lifetime.
I'm glad you asked that. That's a very interesting interesting question. That set of questions, those electronics questions, were first written back pre-1990 on paper. We got them into the first SToMP system in about 1995, and they've been used for 15, 16 years in 3 assessment systems: the first SToMP system, second SToMP system, and now this SToMP II system, where we got them adaptive. So that has been pretty efficient. It's saved a huge amount of staff time marking them. The lecturer giving the course just has to press the button and you end up with the marks. The analysis that I've been doing is obviously much more time consuming. It could be automated, except that I'm continually changing the system until recently. But it comes out in a spreadsheet in Excel, and the sort of analysis that you saw there was all done by hand, picking out the numbers. Now, I do think that in the world there must be sufficient people teaching courses that overlap to the extent that the same questions could be used. And that Physical Sciences question bank, which I confess is my work again, has a huge number of questions that can be used by different people in different places and are being used. We've had nearly 2,000 sessions of people coming onto that question bank and ending up taking questions. I haven't got the figures to hand as the number of questions that have been downloaded, but it's big. But they are, frankly, they're pathetic questions, I think. The vast majority are just simple multiple choice. Right, wrong, and that's it. These electronics questions I will be putting on that question bank in the not too far distant future, in the QTI II part of it. And if people were to use the SToMP assessment system, which anyone is free to use, then they can access it directly from the question bank. They don't even have to load it into the SToMP system. The two are closely entwined. And you can build up a set of questions from the question bank and read them directly from there. And if people around the world like to create more such questions so that the effort is spread over a large number of people, or more than one anyway, then it isn't so desperately difficult. But I'm afraid the editors for QTI II that would handle adaptive questions are still only a twinkle in my eye. I don't think any of the others would handle it. Sue, I notice who's here, might be able to answer that question, whether there are any other editors that handle adaptive. But they will be developing. I'm working on one that I'm hoping will come up soon as something that would allow adaptive questions to be edited.
I wondered, Sue, whether you wanted to take the microphone and make any comments on that. Okay, I see Sue's typing in some comments, so we'll see that when it comes up. How do you do that? There should be a talk button on the left-hand side of your screen for the window for this. Do you see that, Sue?
Yep, gotcha. Thank you. Sorry about that. Yes, editing these sort of questions can be quite a difficult thing to do, because you've got an enormous amount of logic hiding in behind there. We do have one system that allows you to edit mostly mathy kind of questions, but really it takes you back into basically the sort of stuff that you would really see in the XML itself. So to some extent you're not winning a great deal. The new system, though, that we're currently developing in the Unicurate project will have little templates. It's already up there, actually. I can give you the link when I stop talking. I think I have to hold the talk button down. So the Unicurate project is taking, rather than thinking in QTI terms, it's thinking in terms of what I want to do in this question. So for instance, I want to put some text there so that people can read it. I want to put up a multiple choice and fill in the choices and fill in the feedback alongside of those choices. Or maybe I want to do some particular kind of question. And so we're taking a fairly modular approach, but there is in the back an XML editor that you can go into and modify things. So Unicurate takes a slightly different view. Oh yes, that's the fella. And you can get in there and see both the easy editor and the expert. It says something like drop to expert mode down at the bottom of the left-hand side, which gives you a whole bunch of nice, scary XML. But really, it's a lot easier to edit this sort of logic in the XML than in any of the systems that we've got at the moment. Please feel free to contact me. I'll bung in my email at the bottom if anybody wants to take that any further with me. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Suno. Just click it again to see you come off the talk. That's good, thanks. Now, you don't for those of you who want to speak as well, you don't have to hold your finger down all the time on the mouse button for that. You can just click it and then talk and type away, and that'll be fine. So is there anyone else who would like to ask any questions or make any comments? While people are thinking about that, perhaps just one question to you, Dick, about this as well. I mean, one of the typical things people will say is, okay, my institution uses Moodle, or my institution uses Blackboard, or we use question mark perception or something like that for our online assessment system. I guess the thing that for a lot of academics is that if there's another system they have to use, or a system that's not linked in some way to their main system, that's always a thing that puts people off. So what would you give in terms of recommendations about that? Because clearly, I guess most people would like to see everything tied up and connected in some way.
Yes, this is a bit of a problem. There is one of the assessment systems, I think it's Mathassess, has been put into Moodle, linked into Moodle. I have been told that it isn't a very difficult job to get SToMP linked into Moodle, but I don't know how to do it, and I don't have the brain cells to get on with that. Although one of the people in that QTI project, I think, does, and I might be able to persuade them to help there. Quite what Moodle would do with all the information that comes out, particularly these adaptive questions, I have no idea. And the editor that Sue was talking about, I don't think handles adaptive. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sue. So I'm afraid we're a little bit away yet from supporting people developing the sort of questions that I've been showing you today, other than working in XML, and I would not recommend that. That is a desperate job. Sorry to be negative there. I'm doing the best I can, but it does take time.
Certainly, from my point of view, there's no criticism there. It was really just an observation more than anything else. I noticed Sue's made a comment there about VLEs and about how to join these things up. It's just that the models that you've been presenting, I think, are excellent models, and they would allow us to do very many sophisticated things. But I know that from the point of view of the sort of mainline discipline-based academics, they're only going to spend a limited amount of time doing these things, and they certainly want systems that are already connected and in place for them to be able to use. I guess that's also one of the reasons that we have data banks of questions that are sitting there, so people don't have to write their own. They can use the questions from somewhere else. But I know, say, in institutions in Australia, one of the issues there about using databanks of questions is that many academics look at a question and they say, well, I wouldn't quite word it that way, or the feedback I would probably word a little bit differently. So often what academics like to do is to take something like a question from the data bank and all the feedback and associated things and actually just be able to change it very slightly, perhaps to the sort of the expressions that they're used to using or the way in which their students are used to doing that.
Yes, indeed. I'm completely sympathetic with that, but we live in a real world, and we have discovered during the SToMP development that if you tell people that they can't change it, they won't use it. But if you can't tell people they can change it, they will use it without changing it, which is a curious thing. Also, the adaptive questions will only run on a fairly small subset of assessment systems. So your questions about how they link into VLEs and so on is very relevant, and people might well have to use them outside their local VLE. And I know that there are institutional policies on that sort of thing. On the other hand, if they're using them not for marking, but principally for helping the students learn, and the marks might be such a small part of the total marks that they can get away with it, it might be a possible route for people to go down.
Thank you. Any other comments or observations from our participants? I'd certainly like to thank everyone as well for putting in URLs there, because as I indicated, and we're recording all this, and this will be available for all your colleagues or anyone else. Matthew will be putting this up on our website so that everyone will have access to that. And it's really great to have things like URLs in there that people can go and visit and explore in their own time. So Dick, I'd just like to thank you very much for giving up your time today for this. It's been great. It's been really good to have a look at the system and to give it some. I know it's quite well known in the UK, but I think it's also good to make sure that people elsewhere are aware of these systems, but also to get us to think a little bit more about how we might be able to use these for professional development, because that was the first thing that struck me when I looked at that matrix that you put up. As I said a couple of times here, I thought that would be actually a very nice way of directing some of our professional development activities. But I think it's also a way of people being much more reflective about the questions they ask students, the feedback they give, the use to which the feedback is put, but also how that impacts, again, on their teaching. So that the next time they perhaps go through these concepts and these ideas, they're thinking more about the way in which students are perhaps going to respond to this and the paths that they might take through answering these questions. So I think that's been really good. So Dick, I'm not sure if there's any last comments that you want to make there.
No, I don't think so. Jeff, I just put in the comment there. I'd be very interested and happy to get involved with anybody who wanted to use these sort of questions, develop them, use them from the bank, particularly with other disciplines. Very interested also developing different question styles, one of which is free text entry and the automatic assessment of free text entry. Someone at the Sally Jordan has been working on using pattern matching, simple pattern matching, to analyze free text entry, and I think there's a lot of mileage to be got out of such things, and she's using the same sort of constructive feedback to help people get to the right answer.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, again, another fascinating area about how we can use the affordances of the open text entry, and then to be able to automate some of the processes around that. No, that's definitely another topic. We have looked at that in some ways. There's people from the Open University who've been doing quite a bit on that, and Open University in the UK, and there's people here in Australia who've been looking at some of those things as well. So I'd just like to thank everyone for participating in today's